career in the 21st century. And I'm going to start with what has become a common expression we should all keep in mind. What got you here won't get you there. What got your parents to a good, successful life, or if you're the parents or the grandparents, what got you through your career is not going to get young people, children, grandchildren to a successful career, where in the 21st century, what worked back in the 1990s doesn't work now. So 5 steps to a successful career. First of all, I always liken it to a journey. We're taking a trip to a successful career, and the first step of any journey, and nobody ever thinks of this, is to say goodbye. When you go on a trip, you're leaving somewhere, someone, something. So we've got to say goodbye to the ideas that worked in the 20th century because they don't work now. And one of the things we've got to say goodbye to is the attitude of looking for a job. Jobs are very scarce. On the other hand, spoken like a true economist, work is extremely plentiful. So we've got to, first of all, change the focus in our mind from looking for a job to looking for work. And I'll get ahead of myself, but this is one of the important things as a talk. And how do we look for work successfully? We think of the entrepreneurial question. If you're writing anything down, write this down. What good or service can I supply that someone is willing and able to pay for? What good or service can I supply that someone is willing and able to pay for? And stories about how you shift from jobs to work. In my long career as an economist, I have been asked, how do people get work, where are the jobs, all that sort of thing. And one case came from a newly graduated engineer. Engineering is a good field, it's in high demand, it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where a lot of the action is, all that sort of thing. He had been sending out resumes for a year and hadn't gotten a nibble. And I said, that's because you're looking for a job, which are very scarce, and not looking for work. Read the business pages, check out the news sites, find out what projects are going that are related to your engineering field. I don't know what it is. Write to the contractor and offer to work on that project on a contract basis. He had been sending out resumes for a year without any nibbles. The first letter he sent out asking for project work, he was hired. At the end of that project, if the contractor liked him, they'll probably keep him on for other projects. And if they don't, he might just have to check the news sites for another project and do it again. Psychology. Psychology, I hope there's no psychologists in the room, is one of the most oversupplied professions. We have far more psychologists and far fewer opportunities for them, and so newly graduated psychologists have real trouble getting work, getting jobs, unless they think about getting work. And one psychologist was looking for work in the employee assistance programs in large organizations. If you've ever worked with a large organization, they have these programs so that the employees can work at their own problems and family problems and help them get through those. Of course, there were no jobs. She set up her own company and went to all these and said, you are a middle-sized organization, you're a relatively small organization, you can't afford an employee assistance counselor, but for a small retainer, you can put my name and phone number in your employees directory, and I will provide these services, and you will pay on an as-needed basis. She has had a very successful career. A writer. Writer shouldn't have done this first step. He sent out 1 million. You notice I exaggerate with my numbers. he sent out 1 million or so resumes and didn't get work. But out of those, a smaller number were polite enough to send him a notice of sorry but no thanks. And then he went back to all those who had been polite enough to respond to his resume and said, can I do any project for you? Can I write any speeches for you? Can I help writing your manual or doing all these other things? And 1 or 2 of them said yes. And his career was launched. And then another area, and I'm saying this because it is very, very surprising, I think, for people who are looking for work at the entry-level service. And people who work in basic services like restaurant services should be very proud of themselves because they are in extremely high demand. But still, it is not easy to get work. And some of you may have noticed the new, you'll excuse the expression, Trump Hotel that is opening in Vancouver. They wanted to staff that hotel. They put notice of the positions available, basically everything, from chambermaids on up. Notice online. To be considered, you had to fill out an online application that would take you at least 30 minutes. These are for chambermaid jobs, kitchen help jobs, very basic jobs. So you have to be literate, you have to be computer literate, you have to have time and patience. Half an hour to fill out an application. They got, hold on to your chairs, 10,000. Then of the 10,000, they winnowed it down to a few hundred. And before you got hired, even for a basic job at that hotel, you had to go through 4, count them, interviews with different levels of people. So basically, even to get a job as basic as that, you still have to be literate, you still have to be patient, you still have to have computer skills, people skills, and so on. And that takes us to the next step in our job, getting a ticket for our journey. And our journey, a ticket for our journey is our skills, not certification. Employers don't look for certification, or if they do look for certification, it is only as a sieve. I have seen far too many people who go and take a course at a college, at a university, and then get out and expect someone to give them a job. It doesn't happen. I hate to admit it, I have made grown women cry. This was a week before graduation at UBC, MSW program, and they decided, better late than never, to invite me in to talk about job prospects for their newly graduating MSWs. And there were some people in the room, including more mature, gone back to school at great cost and great effort women, who are going to get an MSW, who had worked very hard for 2 years and were now about to graduate. And I had to tell them, just because you have a piece of paper in one hand that says MSW, and a piece of paper in the other hand that says, my professor thinks I'm a nice person, doesn't mean anyone is going to give you a job. And no one told them that, and they didn't think to ask those kinds of questions before they started the program. So the certificate, sometimes it's necessary because of all the 1,000 applicants. Okay, we'll only look at people who have degrees, or we'll only look at people who have this piece of paper or that piece of paper. But what gets you the work or the rare job is the ability to do something. You have to have skills, you have to be able to perform the skills you need, technical skills. A lot of people, there are more technicians keeping the world running than we can ever think of. So the technical skills are extremely important. I don't say trades because the merger between trades and technical is just about complete. I remember way back when trades were for the dumb people who could only use hammers. Now, to get into any decent trade like electrician, you need good, solid math background. You need good digital background. You need to be pretty smart, and so on. So technical, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that is where an awful lot of the demand is. And of course, digital. That's how we do just about everything now. I remember I had a medical procedure, and I decided as I lay there, strange things were going on my inside, and I watched the doctors manipulating things inside me on a keyboard, and I could see the screen where it was all happening. And I said, hey, medicine has become a video game. So everybody needs the computer skills. People skills, relationships, very, very important to be able to get along with people. When computers were first coming in, not too many people knew about computers, and if you managed to get a good techie to work for you, you didn't care if he couldn't talk in sentences. You didn't care if he wore t-shirts with rude sayings. You didn't care about anything like that because he was technical. There are no jobs like that anymore. Everybody has to be able to get along with people. If you can get along with people, you can sell. And sometimes it's just selling yourself to get the work. If you can sell yourself or any other good service, idea, or so on, you are going to be successful. It's amazing how many people can't, and this is a true and recent story that illustrates the difference between certification and the ability to do something, having a skill. A very young friend of mine, just out of high school, got the kind of job that all the kids want, working for a not-for-profit green organization for the summer, making the world a better place. And like just about every other not-for-profit everywhere, they're always looking for money. So a big part of this fresh out of high school kid's job was getting on the phone, asking people for money. And she did it, and she could do it, and she did it well. And then she said, you know what I'm amazed at is all the regular staff in this organization have degrees in marketing, and they can't or won't call anybody up and ask them for their support. So that is a perfect example of certification. I've got a piece of paper that I can say market, and no skill. I can't do one of the very vital things about marketing, namely call people up and ask them for something. Okay, so people skills, relationships, very, very important. Business skills, managerial skills. In any company, and even in not-for-profits, you've got to have the basic skills to keep track of the money, to keep track of the people, to get the invoices out, all that sort of thing. So basic business skills, and since you're likely to be working on contract and therefore in effect self-employed, even more important. The other surprise, of course, and big difference is there is no one below you, no matter where you are, to pass the administrivia down to. I realized that 23 years ago when I set up my own office after working in government and large organizations for a long time, and as I stood there in the middle of Office Depot and said, wow, I don't need an outbasket. Okay, the other thing you've got to do is make your customers or your employer look good. So there, don't put sayings that are too rude. You can dress casually, but don't put sayings that are too rude on your t-shirt. Talk nicely. Funny story about an immigrant that came to Canada. Very bright, educated immigrant, but his first job that he could get was in a lumber camp. And he learned English in a lumber camp. And in English in a lumber camp, every second word begins with F. And then after he'd been around for a while, he managed to get his job with high-tech engineering company. And at his first board meeting, somebody mentioned something he hadn't heard of, and he said, "What the heck is that?" And all conversation ceased. He was a very smart man. He never used that word in that company again. Okay, so you've got to look good. Burton Snowboards. Anybody here ever heard of Burton? Yeah, okay. This was started by a couple of hot doggers in New England, and they didn't go to school. They wore baggy pants. They developed snowboards. They had fun on the hills. They started a whole industry and a whole sport and a whole everything. And one of those guys got fired from the company, a founder, a high-level person in the company, when the company went electronic. Because he was bright, he was smart, he was capable, he was everything, but he couldn't spell. He was functionally illiterate. Illiterate doesn't mean you can't read a stop sign. It means you can't write stuff to the print level, not to the phone level. And he couldn't, and he made the company look bad, and he got fired. So basic literacy is one of the skills. So your ticket, your skills, what you can do, not what pieces of paper you have, though you may need those too, but what you can do. And if you want to prove you can do something, it's better if you have done them to tell someone who's going to give you work or a job. Passport. It's a global economy. You need not only a ticket, you need a passport. And passport is your network. A network, think of a net. Don't think of the internet because it's really, really hard to picture the internet in your head. Picture a fishing net. And in that net, the strands go in all directions. So when you think of networking, don't think of who can give me money, who can give me work, who can give me contacts, who can give me a job. Think of, and starting right from the get-go, what can I give someone? Can I put, even if you're just a high school kid, hey, I know someone who can do something and my uncle is in that business, can I put them in touch? Think of what you can put into the net and not just what you can get out of it. And then networking is very, very important. I worked for the government for a long time. And the government started doing things over that tenure that they'd never done before and weren't supposed to do. They started laying people off. It wasn't a case of get hired at 19 and start calculating your pension benefits anymore. No jobs are forever, even in government. And a lot of the people did quite well. They landed on their feet, they went on to better things, present company included. And some people really didn't. And you could tell who was who by who they had had lunch with. And if people went out, met friends, met colleagues, met people in other sectors and industries, and had lunch with them, they had a network. People knew who they were, knew what they could do, they landed on their feet. And if people, as occasionally happens in government, spent their lunch hours with their immediate colleagues, bitching, if you'll excuse the word, about how bad their situation was, they didn't have a network, and they had real trouble. So lunching, and if you're in a situation where you can't get away for lunch, what you do in your after hours and weekends and who you do it with counts. Being electronically connected for business, LinkedIn is the site. Facebook, the others, they're important, but for business, if you're looking for work, LinkedIn is the prime site. And the other thing about negative networking, start as soon as you get your own phone. Parents tell your kids, grandparents tell your grandchildren, and realize that unless you are independently wealthy, you are going to have to earn a living. And everything you have ever put on the net or had put on the net in any format, no matter how private, no matter how long ago, is going to be there forever, and it's going to jump out and bite you when it can do the most harm. Ask any politician. And so I think recently there was one poor politician who used a mild racial slur 14 years ago and it's in the newspaper now, biting her. Okay, so you've got to tell people the net is like the lead headline item on the biggest news site. Everything you put there, don't put anything there that you would not want to see on the headline item on the biggest news site. Don't send your boyfriend or girlfriend lewd pictures. Don't, ventilate in a lot of bad language. Remember that this is part of your job application, your work application, and be very, very careful of what you put there. It's very hard to tell that to a 13-year-old, but at least tell them so they can't say they never have been told. Okay, work hard. Since more of us are going to be working on our own behalf rather than having a job, we're going to be entrepreneurs, we're going to be self-employed, and a nice professor at UBC, visiting professor at UBC, did this study, I have to say this slowly, a statistically significant study of what makes a successful entrepreneur. And he interviewed all these successful entrepreneurs, and he found out that some of them were good people persons, and some of them weren't. Some of them were very careful about their accounting and their bookkeeping, and some of them weren't. Some of them had technical skills, and some of them didn't. Now, where they didn't have these kinds of skills, the successful ones were all smart enough to get help, so someone else was doing those functions for them. The one thing they had in common, as this professor dramatically put it, was the ability to sleep fast. In other words, they worked hard, they worked long, they didn't laze around, they had to sleep fast to get their rest in so they could put in the work that is needed to be successful. And working hard is one of the big things. Okay? Another thing I tell young people is you have to do your homework. Don't be like the MSW lady. Check out the job and work opportunities before you invest in 6 years of education. The fastest growing fields, some of which you never heard of or barely heard of even in the 90s. Software publishers are going faster by double the next fastest growing field. The next fastest growing field, and here you can make the world a better place, is waste management and remediation. Garbage isn't sexy, sewage isn't sexy, that's where the work is. Computer systems, design and services. If everything is going to be done by computers, we need people who can run those systems, maintain these systems, keep them going. Those are the, and gambling is in the top 10. For all the people who don't have STEM or networks or anything, your best hope is to go out and buy a lotto ticket. So, when I was with the government, started very young, and they had a seminar on retirement. And I'm an economist, and I was thinking retirement, how much money do I need, present value, how will it compound, all that sort of thing. I better go to that seminar and figure it all out. And the seminar wasn't about finances at all. It was about what you're going to do in retirement. So the first thing they asked us to do was write your own obituary. Thank you, no. I don't want to do that. And the second was imagine a perfect day. And because I was young, my perfect day was working. And at the beginning of my perfect day, I would finish some research. Research is hard slogging work. Finishing it and seeing the results is fun. And at the afternoon of my perfect day, I would present the results of my research to an audience. About several decades later, I suddenly realized that my dream has come true. I have an economic consulting business. I do research. I get help with the hard slogging parts of the research, and I present the results of my research to people like you. Thank you very much for listening. May all of your dreams come true.
Take a few questions. So if you're able to come up to the staircase here to ask your question in the microphone, that would be great. And if you're not, we'll repeat your question so that everybody can hear you.